here. So we will begin with the roll call. Mr. Westerson, if you want to start with a roll call, please. You have to speak loudly.
Councillor Middleton Hope is online.
If you're asking if I'm here, I am.
Mr. Westerson has no microphone because his screen will not turn on after today's power outage, so he has no voice.
What I'll do is Councillor Palladino.
Councillor Palladino?
Councillor Parker. Here. And
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Westerson. We'll try not to make you have to speak or you'll have to yell. It happens. All right. We'll start next with the acknowledgement statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda, I have a motion from Councillor Palladino. Be it resolved that the agenda of the regular meeting of the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee of March 2nd, 2023 be adopted as presented. Councillor Palladino.
If there are no additions or deletions to the agenda, I would move that we proceed.
Yep, the agenda stands as it is. Question's been called. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Moving on to our consent agenda, I have a motion from Deputy Mayor Parker. Be it resolved that the minutes of Civic Works Standing Policy Committee held on December 1st, 2022 be approved and the Chair and City Clerk designate be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee receive as information the status of initiatives 0302-2023. Deputy Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If there's anything that needs to be adjusted or edited, please let it be known now. Otherwise, I'd call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Passes unanimously as well. So that moves us on then to our first presentation. We have a presentation from Dale Lear, Business Development Officer of Integra Biologics, on the Chinook Biosphere and Integrated Bio-Industrial Facility. Mr. Lear, you will have 10 minutes, at which point we'll open it to the public or to any questions. So please come forward. If you need any adjustments on the microphone, just let us know. We can move that around. And if you want to introduce your fellow presenters so that Mr. Westerson has them for the record.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's a real pleasure to be here today and appreciate you finding a few minutes of your valuable time to hear from us. In addition to myself, I have with me today Derek Gauger, who is an extremely experienced renewable energy developer who's been involved in project design, financing, operation, and construction. And as well, we have Ms. Marty Murphy, who is the CEO and president of Tallstrip Construction Group, a local, well-regarded and established business operating here in Lethbridge for the past 80 years. So with that, we're, again, happy to be able to present this opportunity to you. So what we're talking about here is an integrated bioindustrial facility. So we have a situation where we have the opportunity to bring together both the environment and the economy together in one beneficial project in a broader concept known as the circular economy, which focuses on taking waste resources, extracting the maximum value from them, and then returning that to the environment in a beneficial fashion. Next slide. So we called it an integrated bioindustrial facility and proposed to help Lethbridge become a world-class agri-foods industry leader by integrating area livestock and agricultural production with local food and organic residuals processing into a fully integrated environnomic system. Again, we call this the circular economy, and we're here to help show you a vision of how that can become a reality. Next slide. So Lethbridge has already been identified by senior levels of government as Canada's premium food corridor. And billions of dollars of our economy depend on this sector. Governments have invested billions of dollars to help make this a reality. Everything from building our hub at the exhibition park, but as well as investments in twinning the highway, irrigation upgrades, and so forth. So we are working with that trend and in that direction. So we also understand that in order to have a healthy and viable agri-foods sector, we also need to have wastewater treatment. And that's a requirement that we presently don't have adequate capacity to accommodate the many manufacturers and food products processors that would like to come to Lethbridge. Next slide. So Stantec has been contracted to do a conceptual design and to upgrade and increase the capacity of the existing facility. Now, this is going to be a major investment that is expected to cost, again, we won't know until we see their estimates, but hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that's going to put pressure on the city's finances and cause us to become creative in the way we fund this kind of a procedure. Next slide. So in the area here, we have estimated 750,000 head of feeder cattle, and we believe that estimate to be low. We also know that there are some feeders that are presently doubling some of their production capacity. So we have a lot of residual organic materials out there. We also have a lot of residuals from farming activities, and there's also some environmental issues aside from that. Historically, the way of disposing of those animal wastes is just to put them on the land, and they've reached some points where in some areas of the county now, there's simply no more capacity to add more of those unprocessed organic materials to the land. Get back a few. Okay, so there's environmental issues involved here. Air, soil, water. These are all necessities for both human and livestock and crop performance, and there are regulatory limits on those. And as well, we have some coming restrictions on the amount of chemical fertilizers that are going to be used, and meanwhile, demands for water are increasing. So we need to be very conscientious and effective stewards of these resources. Next slide. So the process is called regenerative agriculture. So what we do is we make a closed loop system whereby the wastes from one process become feedstock for another. And at the end of the day, what we end up doing is putting back into the soil the nutrients and valuable components that are necessary for soil health and for plant health and ultimately livestock health. But we take out the energy. So what we do is we extract the maximum value out of this underutilized resource and put the beneficial parts back into the environment where they belong. Next slide. So our solution is a combination of steps, starting with an anaerobic digestion facility, which takes these organic wastes, again, a proven process that's being used very widely in Europe and is becoming more used in North America. And we have a couple small operations in southern Alberta that are actually following this process. And the result is to produce something called biomethane, which is a direct drop-in replacement for natural gas. But as well, we have other valuable other valuable byproducts. So biofertilizer. We also have food-grade CO2 that can be collected and used in our agri-foods processing facilities and in greenhouses and so forth. And then we also have something called biochar, and we have a particularly interesting take on that we can maybe discuss later. Next slide. So the renewable natural gas process begins with taking the waste, collecting it, putting it in digesters, producing biogas, refining it, upgrading it, putting it into the natural gas pipeline, for which there are many, many industrial customers who are looking to reduce their environmental footprint, as is the city of Lethbridge, I think, interested in taking the path of minimum environmental impact. And so we are just fitting into the trends that are already coming down the pipeline. And right now we have the opportunity to kind of get a lead on it before these become mandatory requirements. Next slide, please. So there are many financial and other benefits associated with this project, one of which is making available for this kind of development financing which the city would probably normally not access for its project funding. So not only can we improve the speed and efficiency of this project implementation and transfer risk from the public sector to the private sector, but also provide clear lines of accountability. But most importantly, we can focus on outcomes and core services. So what we're putting forth today is a plan whereby the city can benefit from a business application above and beyond which it would normally not consider entering into as a strictly utility operator. And next slide. So this isn't new, this idea of a 3P partnership and private funding for utilities and other related processes. This is being done in many, many places, and more communities are turning to this source of funding because of constraints on funding, because of increasing regulations, and increasing difficulty simply raising taxes to fund every project that comes down the pipeline. So this isn't a new idea. We are actually fitting into an evolving environment where this is being depended on more and more for infrastructure funding. Next slide. So I could go into a great deal of detail, but again, in the interest of time efficiency, what I'd like to do is just skip to slide 24. Okay, so what we're asking from the City of Lethbridge is to become a full and effective partner in this. We know that the city conducts itself in a business-like manner, and we would like to provide the other sources of resources and expertise which complements the city to operate in an effective and efficient manner. And so what we need from the city to make this a reality is your support for cutting the red tape and expediting the process so that we don't get bogged down. We like to have full cooperation, which is access to all types of data, the results of the Stantec study, and other considerations which you may have for a project of this nature. And then finally, we're looking for $1.2 million in seed capital to make the city a full and effective partner in this, because this is very important to show some skin in the game to become of interest to third-party funders. The money is to be used for what we call a functional planning study, and that's why we think this makes such an ideal partnership, because you have the need, we have certain resources, and by bringing them together, we can achieve certain scales and efficiency that just simply wouldn't be possible if the city chose to go down this path on its own. So with that, again, if you've got questions, each of us has our own particular areas of specialty, but we welcome all good questions. Thank you.
Well, if you only want good questions, you may be in the wrong place.
Okay.
I was joking. But is there any
We had to start somewhere.
Are there any members of the public here who'd like to speak on this? I don't think I see anybody who's not part of the organization, so we'll move to questions. I have first in the queue Deputy Mayor Parker.
Thank you very much, Acting Chairperson, or Chairperson. It's kind of funny, Miss Murphy, I remember years ago, my first job ever, for this is sidebar here, was working at Wendy's back in, I think I was 14 years old, and I remember you coming in there and making sure the whole operation was running right, so it's neat to see you again, but that's
Nice
quite
to
a
see
while
you
ago.
too. Yes.
And welcome. This is an amazing presentation. Thank you very much. And obviously, I'm glad our administration team's here as well to answer questions. And Madam Chair, first of all, I know it's up to us to ask the questions at all, but since it's being an SPC, will you allow the administration to ask questions as well if they see fit that we may not think about at that time?
The administration may respond to questions, and if a question comes out of their response, I see no problem with that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. First of all, can this, I don't know if this, you can answer this or Mr. Kelp can answer this. Will this have a financial impact or a process impact on our water treatment plant at this time? Or the sewage treatment plant?
Yeah, you may as well have a seat, Mr. Cope. I think you'll be answering a lot of questions.
Want me to repeat the question or?
No, I think in looking at the proposal, as you know, some of it's in the slides that were skipped over, but the proposal is to import millions of tons of manure into the city to be processed in order to get the energy out of it. One of the impacts on the wastewater treatment plant would be the wastewater generated from that process. Anaerobic digestion is really a liquid process. It's the solids that would come out of it are only 5 or less than 10% of what comes out of the digester. The rest is wastewater, and so for millions of tons of manure coming into the city by truck, there would be millions of cubic meters of wastewater generated that would be high in ammonia and phosphorus discharged to their treatment plant. And so it would add to our load.
So in turn then, if we were to then obviously would you need to do some kind of upgrade or some kind of infrastructure improvement to take on that capacity, based on what I heard?
Well, the last time we had this opportunity, about 10 years ago, with Lethbridge Biogas, we refused to take their wastewater because of the negative impact on our treatment plant. The city of Lethbridge has operated anaerobic digesters for over 60 years, and we know what comes out the back end. And the water that we generate on site is challenging enough. So to add millions of cubic meters to our load of high nutrient wastewater, if we had the choice, we would not take it. And so in the case of Lethbridge Biogas, we refused them a connection to the wastewater system in Rave because we didn't want their wastewater.
And that, my other question was, has any other organization or other firm approached the city? And obviously,
Well, yes, we
That's the
worked
one
with
you're just
Lethbridge Biogas about a decade ago, and in last winter we did take some of their digestate to help seed our digesters to recover from an upset, and so we do have a relationship with them, but it's we will not take their wastewater because it will preclude us from treating wastewater from other industries.
does that put us at risk, of course, with Alberta Environment then as well?
There's always a risk, and the risk resides with us. And even all of the PPP examples that Dale provided you with, every one of those municipalities is still beholden to the regulator. You cannot delegate your responsibility to the environment as a municipality.
I have further questions, but I'll save it for later. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelp.
Sanchez, I see you're in the queue. Is this to follow up on what was just said?
Yes, just to follow up a little bit on the questions from Councillor Parker in regards if any other industry has approached the city in the past, like Doc mentioned, yes. The approach was about their wastewater, but not so much into the side of seeking for funding or helping them. There are a few biogas facilities within the region, and they have been operating, like Mr. Kaup mentioned before, for quite a few years. So just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
If we could comment.
Madam Chair, if we may, my esteemed colleague would like to actually respond to Councillor Parker's question because there's a more fulfilling answer that could be provided with regards to what we're proposing.
Wanting that answer?
Well, I want to make sure I follow process as well. And so this is where the SPC can get a little, so what I'll do is we'll ask the questions, but to be fair to you, Ms. Murphy, you heard the answer there. Do you have any concern with the answer that you heard?
Yes, I think that the process that we're proposing is quite different than what Mr. Kaup explained. So if I could just have Derek just give a brief, just a touch point on the system that we are proposing when it comes to materials.
Yeah, so each one of our digestion facilities will process approximately 100,000 tons per year of manure straw mix. From that, out of the digesters, as Dale said in his presentation, we extract a vast majority of the solids to make biofertilizer. But how our system is different, being a specialized engineered system for the feedstock, for the location, is that we handle all of our wastewater. It's a closed loop system. So we don't have, we will not provide any burden to the existing wastewater treatment facility.
We always have to be careful, Madam Chairman, when we're in these SPCs because you don't want to be getting debate and all that. So out of fairness to the presenter and to our administration, after hearing that, does it change your opinion at all? It's a weird process, and that the conversation really always goes to the chairperson. So I apologize. Go ahead. Mr.
Well,
Kelp.
for every ton of solids, there's going to be 15 or 20 tons of wastewater, and I don't know where you're going to put the water.
It's recirculated back into the digester tanks.
Right, okay.
Okay, so we won't get into any debate. I'll answer the question there. We'll move on to Councillor Palladino's questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What makes you think the city would have had in this in the first place? Sorry.
Well, the city is in a unique position right now where the lack of wastewater treatment facility actually presents an obstacle to the senior levels of government economic development plans, both in terms of economic growth, jobs, employment, import replacement, export development. So we think this is something the city should naturally be interested in. And the fact that we bring forth knowledge, experience, and funding for this type of project that the city normally wouldn't have access to, it would be surprising that the city would not find this of interest.
Okay. If the issue, I heard it was mostly livestock waste, is it possible to eliminate that from your feedstock? Like, just...
Probably not feasibly, because livestock waste has bioactive nutrients in it, bioactives in it that make a digestion process more effective. But again, Derek is the technical expert in that area, if I can allow him to answer.
A couple of comments. We can minimize it, for sure. If the concern is odor, we can also put special measures in place for odor treatment. It just depends on what the concern is, and that's sort of the crux of the planning process is to look at all of these things, look at items that are of concern to the city and to the residents and taxpayers, and address all of those through specialized design and engineering.
I would think the concern would be, as you mentioned, odor, but also traffic, the amount of trucking involved going in and out. But is this an all or none proposal? What happens if the city just says no, thanks?
Well, again, I would find it very surprising because that's a black and white answer to what's really a technicolor proposal. There are very many different benefits and opportunities built into this one proposal that, again, it's not an all or none type of proposal. There are different stages and phases and attributes to this thing that we could customize to suit both the short, medium, but most especially the long-term needs of the city and the county, because they're actually part of it. We're actually one mega economy here in this region. So there's just so many benefits to be looking at that would be really surprising that the city wouldn't find this to be of interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palladino. Councillor Middleton Hope, hopefully you can hear us online.
I can. You're 5 by 5 today, which is great. I have a couple of questions. Some have been answered, but I have a couple of questions. I guess to city administration, just for clarification purposes, do I understand it that the reason that we have not engaged biodiversification companies in the past who have brought forward similar proposals or proposals that are not dissimilar, I guess, is largely because we have not had adequate capacity in our wastewater facilities? Is that correct?
Through the chair, no, there's multiple reasons why we wouldn't have entertained a manure processing plant within the city. Over 10 years ago, Lethbridge Biogas wanted to be in the Sharing Industrial Park, and on top of the impact on our wastewater that would be discharged from that facility, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency does not allow food processing within 300 meters of a waste processing plant. So we would have sterilized our industrial park from being used for food processing. And though this proposal claims to have food processors next to manure processing or waste processing, that's not possible in Canada.
Thank you for that response. You indicated that perhaps the most recent exchange we've had was 10 years ago. Have circumstances changed in the last 10 years?
You mean, do they allow for food processing next to wastewater treatment plants?
No, because you just answered that. No, I'm just talking about circumstances in general. Have they changed that would make it more likely that we would be in favor of this project?
The market for biomethane is different now than it was 10 years ago. That is a change. I don't believe it's relevant to whether the city's interested in partnering into such a venture.
If I might probably add another
Go
note
ahead,
here,
Mr. Sanchez.
is my understanding, even in interactions with Lethbridge Biogas back in the day, 10 years ago, they also had a similar idea that was considered for using manure and other elements into their process. And it was recently, 3 years ago, it was discarded because it wasn't not feasible for them. Using the technology, we understand there might be a different technology here, but it's not something that has proven to be feasible. The other point in terms of our plant operations, I don't think the conditions are different. Right now, we are at a capacity at the plant, and we are having a phase one where we're going to expand that capacity, but that capacity, the goal to do the expansion is to allow for industrial customers that could be relocating or settling within the city limits.
Well, thank you for that additional comment, Mr. Sanchez. Another question to Ms. Murphy and Mr. Lair. Mr. Lair, you indicated that this $1.2 million that you're asking for would demonstrate skin in the game by the city. What skin in the game have you got?
Well, I'll let Ms. Murray address that first, and then I might supplement that.
I think, thank you very much for the question. What we bring to, it's not, I don't really, not the game, but the partnership is we have a piece of land that has been in my family for 83 years. It's adjacent to the water treatment plant, and it has been sterilized, which is a very good word, for any other use other than direct control and industrial application, because there's a 300 to 400 offset that would not allow us to do anything else with the sewage treatment plant. And with my experience in business, and I think we're kind of off topic here because it's not the biggest part of this project is not the manure in southern Alberta. It's an opportunity to look at waste in a different way, which is renewable energy. We work in Fort McMurray. As many of you know, we have gravel pits, and oil and gravel is not a renewable energy. So when you stand back and you look at the landscape of where the economy is going, where the future is going, we're going to be asked to step up. We're going to ask to be more responsible in how we look at our output. And this is a perfect time, a perfect opportunity, because the sewage treatment plant has outgrown itself. You have a huge investment that is so impressive in southern Alberta with your highways, your irrigation system, just to list a few. And you have people chomping at the bit that want to come and build a business in this hub. But we don't have the facility in the sewage treatment plant to deal with all of the offtake, which the Cavendish plant is a very good example, and I'm sure you all know about the offtake that relates to Cavendish, so we won't get into that. But going forward, it's the effluent from the sewage treatment plant that we can capitalize on. It's the methane gas. It's all the things that Dale talked about. And so we are prepared to put our land in play. We are prepared to put our expertise in play. And what is astounding to me is that, you know, different projects that we've built a lot over the years, hotels or whatever, you're always looking to seek funding and what that's going to look like and where you go. But with renewable energy, there are people that are running so fast in this sector that you either are going to get on the bus or you're going to get left behind, because there is going to be a crisis in 2030 when, you know, chemical fertilizer is going to be reduced. There is a crisis with the number of cattle that we have and the output that is not being pulled back into the intake and turned around again to be sustainable and reused. So if, you talk about luck and timing, and that's where good things come from. And good things come from people that are prepared to look past what we've always done, because technology has changed and energy has changed. And this is an opportunity to capitalize on not just the livestock part of it, because that could be another component, and maybe it's not this specific place, because there is, there's people that are standing in line that want to come here with their industry. You've got things out in the Sharing Park right now that, are going to be adding to the stress on the sewage treatment plant. So if you stand back and you look at all of the good things that could come from this, and to put Lethbridge on the map as somebody that's leading in the industry, not just in agriculture, but in technology and how we deal with input and output. And you look at Canada, and Canada is one of the only countries that produces enough food to feed the entire country. But as we roll forward into the future, there's going to be a lot of countries, because of population growth, where our exports could become a major part of our economy. So as fossil fuels and gas lines and oil and what that looks like for the future of Alberta, that looks quite different. But to be able to capitalize on the energy, the input, the output, and build these circular business structures that are going to drive industry, drive jobs, drive people to come to southern Alberta, I mean, it is a phenomenal opportunity. So my part in this is I'm passionate. I am committed to this 100%. And if it doesn't work out with the city of Lethbridge, which would be very sad and unfortunate, it will work out in southern Alberta in other places. But I would love to partner with the city of Lethbridge, a 3P project. It has been done all over the world. It has been done in Canada. Lots of heavy lifting to do, lots of discussions to have, but this can work, and it could be amazing for our city. It could be amazing for southern Alberta. So my involvement is the land, the passion, and to drive this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Sanchez or Mr. Kaup. Are there any other projects? We talked about Lethbridge Biogas, which is 10 years old, but do you know of any other organizations working on anything similar? And if so, have we incentivized any of them?
And then let Mr. Kaup go on. I know there is another biogas facility outside by Chin, and there was last year, I believe, Mr. Kaup might have more information about this. There were rumors about a biocluster that was already happening somewhere in the county. But again, I'm going to defer that to Mr. Kaup to expand if he has more information on that.
Yeah, so there are a number of newer projects that Tidewater Energy has a similar proposal, or it's near High River, that is adjacent to a feedlot, so it's close to the feedstock, and GrowTech out by Chin is been processing potato waste for some years now, and so those are the newer projects. The big shift with Lethbridge Biogas is they started out with generating energy with reciprocating engines with their biomethane, and they're now treating the gas much as Mr. Lear's proposing to natural gas standards, and are selling it to Fortis, to BC Gas, directly putting it into the pipeline.
Thank you. And based on process, Mr. Sanchez, if this is something the city was looking for, would we sole source this, or would we look for an RFQ, RFP? What is the best process that you would recommend for council to consider, if at any point anybody wants to consider this?
Thanks for the question. So at this point, we are currently focused on the phase 1 project for the wastewater treatment plant. When it comes to an analysis like this, city best practice is to go for an RFP process where you actually get unsolicited, you get the proposals based on the requirements and the specs of what we will be looking for. And not really an unsolicited proposal, because again, there might be others that will be there. We typically try to post this for 30 days and then do the analysis based on the requirements that we will have.
Mr. Lear, or your group there, you can understand that one of the concerns we would have is if there are millions of tons of manure being moved. Have you spoken to the county on this? Is it another possibility to work outside the city to do what you're looking to do?
Well, Madam Chair, thank you very much for that excellent question. As a matter of fact, I have had consultations with the county, and in fact have a support resolution from the council to build a facility. The mention of another plant is ongoing and in discussions with the county on that. In fact, the opportunity here is not for one, but for perhaps half a dozen facilities. This is just one that was particularly going to be designed and optimized to work within the city context with the agri-foods processes that are here and in its proximity to the wastewater treatment facility. So there are going to be other facilities and are going to be throughout the county. The idea that we're going to bring millions of tons of manure to Lethbridge was never really part of the plan. I just put that mention up there for contextual understanding of the magnitude of the problem that we face. So we can build a very nice integrated facility here on a main highway where there is also lots of truck traffic in a location that's, by the way, right beside a wastewater treatment facility. So there should be no upset from an environmental, traffic, or other point of view. And one of the uses of that 1.2 million is to flesh out the specifics of a particular plan, but most importantly, the city's commitment in that process triggers proposals from global funders. There are literally billions of dollars of capital in Europe looking for investment in this sector in North America. So that's why the city's involvement and commitment takes us from a run-of-the-mill wastewater treatment facility to a much more profitable bioindustrial facility. And so it's, like I say, the difference between a bicycle and a motorcycle. For the same amount of money, which one would you ride?
Oh, I'd be the bicycle, so I'm not the right one to ask. But Councillor Parker, you're next in queue.
Thank you very much. So to our administration, you've heard the presentation. Do you need direction, political direction to move forward? Are you already looking at these things constantly within your daily operations?
And I'm going to start and then pass it to Doug because I know he has been working on this for quite a few years. My point of view is that we constantly look for opportunities, not only on the wastewater side, but even in other areas that we are working on. And it's part of the work that we currently are entertaining in different areas. So I don't think I need a direction at this point. It will be mostly to continue the work that we do today in terms of opportunities and focusing on the needs and the priorities that we have at this time. But Doug, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, we'll have a CIP amendments that you'll see in the next coming weeks or months that is a plan to expand our facility. We're in need of much more than just an additional digester across the fence. It's going to be, we need to also have our, the water streams, the big part of our wastewater plant expanded as well. So this is not going to, this proposal doesn't make our capacity issues go away. It's the digestion of biosolids is a small part of the puzzle. We do feasibility studies on any number of approaches, processes, opportunities to do things different, and we have investigated gas utilization, and we we continue to struggle with and deal with planning around the disposal of our solids. And so there's lots of components in play. An additional digester is not going to be the silver bullet to all of a sudden allow for a lot of industries to move into town. There's a lot of different components, and private these examples of PPPs that were provided are across the country are all real. In most cases, some of them include financing, some of them don't. The vast majority of them are private operation of public facilities, and if our meeting our obligations, our regulatory obligations, relies on a private facility, on private property operated privately, then we're not in a good position to negotiate or at the end of a contract, assume a different option.
Thank you. But to paraphrase what you said, your department and the departments are constantly looking at new ways of doing things, evolve with understanding the environmental impact, and also understanding Alberta environment standards, as well as taking care and doing due diligence, taking care of the existing infrastructure, if that's what you said there.
That's correct.
Councillor Palladino, you're next in the queue.
Quick question, and thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Leary, you mentioned something about, I have these numbers in my head and I got to get them out before I forget, but a Stantec study and hundreds of millions of dollars. What was that referring to?
Okay, so the Stantec study is basically just a design review process. It's they're just going to try and flesh out an idea. You won't get much for your $365,000 or whatever you gave Stantec for, except an idea on paper. It's none of the preliminary engineering, feasibility studies, environmental approvals, permits, or anything like that. It's just a sketch of what a proposed expansion facility would look like. I've talked to Stantec, and I know the numbers aren't public, but you can expect the bills for that facility alone to be extremely hefty. Now, I want to speak to what Mr. Cope said, if I may, and that is, we're not just talking about a biodigester here. We're talking about a fully integrated facility that's going to deal with all the inputs as well as the waste, the outputs, refining the biogas. So this is the thing. What we can bring to this project is expertise, engineering, talent, funding, stuff that would be completely outside of the scope, and it's not private per se. What we're proposing is a joint venture, in effect. So this is a partnership. It's not, one side versus another. You got this, we got that. We want to work together with the city. We can bring technology, funding, expertise, and economic development opportunities that would not normally be available to the city.
Okay, Councillor Middleton Hope, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've dropped back out. I think most of my questions at this point have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, with our technology, we're never quite sure. All right, my queue is empty. Are there any other questions that any of our committee want to ask, or Councillor Carlson, who's our guest online? If not, we'll move to the resolution. Thank you all very much. If you'd like to have a seat back in the audience, it'll now be to the committee to discuss the resolution.
Thank you very much.
I have a resolution from Councillor Middleton Hope. Be it resolved that the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee receive for information the presentation on the Chinook Biosphere and Integrated Bio-Industrial Facility. Councillor Middleton Hope, if you'd like to open.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the opening has been well discussed by our presenters, so I would certainly open it up for questions.
Okay. Are there questions or any concerns about the motion from any members of the committee? It doesn't appear there's any questions, so if there's any debate or if you want to call the question, it's completely up to you, Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there is any debate.
I have no one in the queue for that either.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then I'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much for the presentation. Administration, of course, has heard. Committee has heard. This will now move forward to Council. for information at the next council meeting. So thank you very kindly for your presentation. We move along to our next presentation, which is on our park system. Blair Richter, General Manager of Parks and Cemeteries, will give the 2022 annual report. And I see he also was very forward, and he gave us the operational plan for 2023 as well. So lots in there. I don't think Mr. Richter is in the room. Oh, sorry. I was looking this way where all the staff were sitting, and you're over here. Mr. Richter, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, members of Civic Works Standing Policy Committee. So the intent of today's presentation is to do two things. One is keep council better informed of the work that Parks and Cemeteries is doing, but also celebrate the great work that our team is doing in our community. So before I get into the presentation, I would like to just acknowledge a few members of the team who have contributed to this report today. First, I want to thank all the members who provided information for the report, and specifically Adam Similai from our team who actually compiled the report, Mike McTavish and the asset management team who have developed a lot of these reporting tools and systems to capture the data and allow us to report on some of these metrics you see today. And lastly, all the Parks and Cemetery staff who are actually doing the work outside, cutting grass, running these projects, managing people. They do a lot of great work for our community, and I want to acknowledge that before I get going. So with that, next slide, please. So 2022 at a glance, some of the challenges we faced in 2022 were, obviously we saw significant cost increases really just about across the board. Supplies, materials, we had equipment breakdowns, and just general supply chain issues that really delayed receiving parts and getting our equipment back on into operation. Some of the positives for 2022, staff continued to adapt to our district approach for operations. We had the Phase 2 grand opening at Legacy Park. We opened up a brand new dog park on the north side. We also had great weather, so Mother Nature was a great contributor to our success. We had good rains in June that killed off a lot of the grasshoppers and really enhanced some of our parks and let that grass grow, which was well needed after 2021. Next slide, please. In terms of expenditures, you can see on the screen here, the left chart really is just our overall expenditures for 2022, and then the right side is a breakdown of our operations and maintenance costs. So next slide, please. In terms of the city's growth, in terms of parks, we added 6.7 hectares of urban parks to our network, increasing our total to 3,108 total hectares. So that's really comprised of over 2,000 hectares of natural parkland, over 1,000 hectares of urban parks, and 66 hectares of cemetery space. Next slide, please. We continue to dig deeper into knowing actually what we own. So this speaks to our asset management program in place and getting a better handle on what's out there in our parks, what infrastructure do we own, what's the value, what's the overall condition, how much life is left in those assets. So our team has done a fantastic job in getting this data sorted out and getting it to a stage where we can properly report on it. So just to quickly acknowledge Andrew Somerville and Cole Runge in this work here. Next slide, please. One of our goals in 2022 was really to enhance our communication and engagement with the public. And we did that by bringing the community along to a couple of our projects, one being the official Parks Playoffs. So this was kind of a fun little project spearheaded by Chris Witkowski. And it was just a fun contest to get people to vote on their favorite park in the city. They could just vote on a head-to-head format on social media. So the ultimate winner was Indian Battle Park for 2022. We also held a naming contest for the new dog park, as of course the new name being the Park and Bark. So we've really tried to ignite our volunteer program, which is now being led by Ashley Walker. Next slide, please. In terms of projects, obviously major activity at Legacy Park. We opened up the brand new Discovery Playground and the brand new Spray Park. Lots of excitement around those two amenities and a lot of traffic going through that park this past year. We replaced a couple playgrounds at Fairmont Garden Park and Heritage Road Park, and we also replaced pea gravel surfaces with pour-in-place rubber at 7 locations. So really trying to increase that inclusivity to our park spaces. A lot of these projects were being managed by Craig Richter and Jackie Cardinal, and they did an exceptional job this year. Next slide. 311 service requests. We had a total of 3,803 requests come in through 311. This is actually an 8% increase from 2021. So you can see the public is really starting to leverage 311 and getting those requests to us. Next slide, please. Cemeteries, so 2022 was the first year that, the first full year with cemeteries and parks as one department. They did exceptional work. Ryan Chuddick and his team over there has been exceptional to work with, moving forward on some columbarium projects, as well as transitioning to a new work order system that better aligns with the rest of the organization. Next slide, please. So operations, just on the screen there, start to show some of the metrics with operations. So operations is led by Hiroshi Okubo. On the screen here, you're seeing some of the metrics related to maintenance, which is being led by Stuart Ackroyd. So this is the group that's out there making sure the parks look green. They're taking care of the grass, doing the mowing, doing the trimming, picking up garbage, all those kinds of things. Next slide, please. Continuing with some other metrics and operations from our irrigation, forestry, and amenity services department. Ron Preddy takes control of the irrigation systems, obviously extremely busy in the summer months and also in the winter planning for improvements over the winter and converting some of our central controllers over. Don Ishikawa takes care of the forestry department. And of course, we have a beautiful tree network in our city, and they do a good job keeping care of all of our beautiful prized assets. And then amenity services being led by Gary Brown. This group are really the sort of the jack of all trades people. They fix fences, repair surfaces, but most importantly, they probably take care of our playgrounds. So excellent work by all of our operations staff. Next slide, please. So as I come to a close of the presentation, looking forward to 2023, there's still that looming uncertainty of inflation and supply issues that we're dealing with. Of course, we've seen the CIP issues we've had with the pickleball courts. We also have to sort of anticipate unique weather, which can impact our operations. On the positive side, we feel very fortunate and in a good spot to be successful in 2023. Obviously, want to acknowledge the Investment Council did in the operating budget to our department. That those additional resources will really help us to be able to perform and pivot as needed. So that's much appreciated. So as I wrap up my presentation and transition to questions, I specifically wanted to end on the operating budget item because there was a motion for our department to come back and perform a review and report back to Civic Works. So before we start the questions, I would actually like to start the question off by asking Civic Works, what exactly are we supposed to bring back for that review when we report back after 2024? I'll start it there. Thank you.
It's not usual in presentations to give us homework, so hopefully that doesn't start a trend. No, just kidding. All right, we will start with any members of the public. I don't think anybody in here is not staff, so I don't think there's any members of the public who have questions. So we'll jump into questions then from council. Councilor Palladino, you're first in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Richter, for the annual report. I'm not surprised with the results of your community satisfaction survey. I'm one of the 93% that makes good use of our park system, and I'm completely satisfied with their condition they're in. The question I have is, where is Firelight Pond, and how did 88,000 goldfish get in there?
Thank you for the question. Firelight Pond is in Copperwood on the west side. The goldfish issue started from people actually putting their fish in the pond and then some reproduction happening inside that pond. So
88,000, wow. And you counted them?
Well, someone counted them in a ballpark, sort of a guess, but yeah, quite a significant number of fish pulled out of there last summer.
Fish are like rabbit. You don't want them to, yeah.
In your operation plan, you provide a quick breakdown of the number of permanent and seasonal staff that's required to maintain all of this beautiful parkland we have. What are those numbers?
So in terms of FTEs, we have about 43 permanent, which includes cemeteries, and about 60 non-permanent. So about around 100.
Last question. As part of your community engagement process, you garnered feedback on additional dog parks. How did that go? And what's your next step?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, we did 2 rounds of engagement with the additional dog park initiative. A wide ranging of opinions on how that project should be going. So we plan to come back to next Civic Works, I believe is April 6th, to present all those results and provide a recommendation moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Middleton Hope, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Richter, and to your staff. Excellent graphics, great presentation, really good visuals, so thank you for that. I have 26 questions to start. The first one, I'm just kidding. Are there greater efficiencies that may be realized by changing our focus to one or more areas on the expenditures wheel? I'm referring specifically to page 7 of 112, and I'm thinking of things like low maintenance scapes, contracting out services where somebody else owns the equipment and we get the results. We pay them to do the work and we get the results from it, and reducing water consumption. So where are we with some of those initiatives?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Milton Hope. Absolutely, we're always trying to find efficiencies in how we operate. I think the first question you spoke to was actually, I'll speak to the second one. The second one was around reduced irrigation. So one of the things we're doing with the central controller conversions is that actually enables our staff to better monitor water usage and consumption. So one thing it does is if there's a rain event, it also has the ability to turn those systems off immediately. We also have weather sensors in there that can shut it off based on the moisture of the ground. So obviously there's opportunities there we've already working on. In terms of just turning irrigation off in irrigated areas, there is a bit of a consequence if we just decide to turn off irrigation on certain irrigated parks. It does lead to increased weeds in those areas, but I think with that central controller project, you're going to see some efficiencies gained with our ability to monitor that water usage a bit better. And then, sorry, the first part of your question, Councillor Milton Hope, if you could just remind me what that first piece was. Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, changing out scapes to low maintenance, for example, utilizing some of the strategies that have been used in warmer climates across North America?
Yep, excellent question. So we did, in response to the KPMG project or report, one of the initiatives for parks and cemeteries was to explore naturalized spaces. And one of the things we started doing a couple of years ago was actually do some test plots in existing spaces by tearing up the existing turf, planting native dryland grasses, and that project is seeing some pretty good success. We're just sort of in the final phases of getting those results and reporting back on how that's gone. The city's also opened up the naturalized park in Southbrook called Discovery Park, which has a lot of those native grasses. So really an opportunity to reduce that manicured look and revert back to naturalized grasses.
Good, thank you for that. I have one other question, then I'll cede the floor and then come back in later. Drylands fire breaks on the west side. Are these new or are they being maintained?
That's a great question. I don't think those are new. I think we've always been maintaining those, from my understanding. But I could clarify for you if you'd like.
Good, thank you. I'll step out, Madam Chair, and come back in.
Thank you. It's kind of fortuitous that we have these two departments here together because in some ways these guys make the plan, work with the subdivision, parks are created, and then you guys get to work, right? Because you get the parks that these guys have created. Does the process work well between the two departments? When new parks are coming on board, Are you guys well prepared for them? How's the communication between the two? How does that work? Because that's where a lot of the growth is coming, is from the new developments, of course.
Absolutely. Our team, we have a large sort of planning team that's involved, and it's across the organization. So members of our team, the planning team, transportation, all those different departments are a part of that process, and our voice is heard in that process.
When you were asking us earlier about what are some of the things that we would like to have review back, that is one of the questions I think we have. We have a large number of parks in this community. Do we have more parks than we need? Do we have the right number of parks? And based on what the community wants, because of course that is a growing expenditure, is more parks, new parks. Do we have good quality in the parks versus quantity of parks? Those are some of the things, is looking into, do we just keep adding parks forever? Or do we at some point say maybe not every community needs a park? Don't know the answer, but love to have that conversation as part of the review. Certainly, it's one of the questions I get from the public, is how close should you be to a park? I mean, I live by Henderson. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love walkability to a park, but we need to have that sort of conversation. In your expenditures, you mentioned Parks General at 12%. Is that administrative costs? What exactly is Parks General costs?
That's exactly it, yeah.
That's what we're looking at there, separate from operations and maintenance. And you also note that we have 24% of our inventory is past the useful life. Do we have a plan for that? How quickly will those be retrofitted and fixed? What's the sort of idea of working on that 24%?
Thank you, the Chair. Thanks for the question, Chair. We do have an asset management plan that we've developed, and so one of the interesting things about that metric there is it explains that a lot of those assets are past their expected life. However, their condition could still be in pretty good shape. So we've actually created a prioritized list of which asset categories get priority treatment in terms of replacements, and then figure out which ones we can replace as needed or as they fail. So we have a plan in place for that, and in every year we have our life cycle program where we target certain assets, replacing playgrounds, upgrading parking lots, pathways. So we have that plan in place today. Yes.
Perfect. Councillor Middleton Hope, you had said you had more questions?
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you. I have two questions not authored by myself, so I'll ask the first two. They're from the public. How is our Dutch elm disease control? And the second question, Mr. Richter, is will the beaver management plan mitigate the devastation along the river valley?
Chair to Councillor Milton Hope. I'll speak to the beaver management program first. So we're still waiting on that report, the final report, to come our way. I have not seen any of the results on that one yet, so it's hard to say what that's going to tell us. It's a very unusual situation as we all balance the demands from nature, whether it's beavers or grasshoppers or whatever, and going out and eradicating beavers or relocating them is not always the best option. So when we get the final data on that, we will obviously have some better intel and make some better decisions moving forward. And the second part, sorry, refresh me again, Milton Hope.
Dutch elm disease.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Yeah, so we have a team they inspect our elm trees every year. We also inject them with a chemical called triazine, I believe, to help protect them against potential pests coming in. So that is one thing we monitor quite closely and have dedicated staff to monitor.
Good, thank you for that information. I'm sure the members of the public that have an interest in those areas will be certainly well versed on them. Two last questions from me quickly. How is your equipment holding up? And do you have adequate resources for graffiti and public space damage mitigation?
Through the chair to Councillor Milton Hope. Our equipment, last year we had a bit of a tough year with a lot of our mowers breaking down. However, we've had conversations with our fleet department, and they are planning to replace several units for this year, so we're in a better condition there. The second piece for graffiti, we do have adequate resources. Unfortunately, these things continue to happen in our community, and our response time for those has been adequate, and the public is very good at notifying us when those tags show up in our community. So I would say we are well suited to tackle those as they show up.
Thank you for that. I just want to make a comment on that in regards to response on graffiti. I think it's more than adequate. I've made calls when I've seen graffiti and it has been eradicated within 24 hours, so I compliment your team. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I find it annoying how quickly they cover up my graffiti. Oh, sorry. I'm kidding, of course. How is our volunteer program going, Mr. Richter?
Going really good. So we've sort of reignited it this year with a new person on our team, and she's done a fantastic job recruiting different people, getting out in the community, different community events, talking to people, handing out flyers. We have a monthly newsletter where we highlight key volunteers in the community. So we are really hoping to see that the volunteer program excel this year. We've sort of laid the groundwork in 2022 and really hoping to build some momentum in 2023.
Are there any plans, discussion, thought to getting back into Communities in Bloom?
I've had that conversation with the city manager. It's on our radar, and it's something that we could definitely consider.
Councillor Carlson, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Richter, for the annual report. Your question was regarding the resolution during the operating budget, and I don't have that in front of me. Perhaps Madam Chair or Mr. Westerson, I know you're on mute, Ryan, but do we know exactly what the resolution said and what it was referring to, so we could maybe assist Mr. Richter?
Imagine Mr. Richter seems to have that right, so he can repeat it for you.
Excellent, thank you.
I'll just read the entire thing if you don't mind. So be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Committee recommend that City Council amend the 2023 to 2026 operating budget to include Initiative N15, Parkland Growth and Capacity Impacts, to create 10 non-permanent full-time positions to meet existing service levels in 2023 and 2024, with funding for 2025 and 2026 to be contingent upon a review and report back to Council to the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee after 2023 and 2024.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Madam Chair. I guess perhaps my take on that was we were presented with a lot of comparators of number of hectares to number of staff, number of citizens, et cetera. I know that one of my questions was, are we comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges? Because I know a lot of our parkland is non-irrigated, manicured, I'll put it that way. The river valley is, and so I would like to ensure that our numbers reflect that and maybe have those kind of comparator updates. Further to that, the push for more naturalized areas, I'm hoping that would be part of the update and report back to say how they're working out, how they could be utilized, what are the challenges or opportunities. For example, I utilize the Northside Green Strip along the industrial area quite frequently, and the naturalized area that was placed there is like in a random spot. It seems to me there were other areas that I thought, why wouldn't you put it back towards the fenced area in amongst the trees, rather than just a square in the middle of a green space, an open green space. So I'd love to hear those kind of that kind of information, how they're working out, how they could be better utilized, how they could be further utilized. I hope that helps a little bit. That's kind of what I was thinking when that resolution came forward, but perhaps my colleagues may have other thoughts.
We always have thoughts, don't we? Deputy Mayor Parker, you're next in the queue.
Thank you very much. And just to follow up on that, I think the reason we wanted to report back was we're giving increasing your capacity to address all the issues that we heard this summer and the summer before, because there were those cutbacks that we had and we reinstated the money. we want to know how are things going with the increased funding that you've gotten. I think additional 10 staff, am I correct on that, Mr. Richter? And if that is sufficient, that at that midterm report and all that, if extra funds are needed or what you're hearing in the community, then we'd be abreast to that, and then we could decide if more funds or resources need to be allocated at that time. I think that's where it came. In regards to sidebar, the dry lands, I remember us talking when we work with the development community. We build these beautiful subdivisions, and as you know, we have there's a what's the term I'm using? An agreement made with them that they oversee the maintenance for 2 years. And the problem that we had was they were so well maintained that we create this high level of service. So there was an idea that in our future developments, this is where development services never come together, and we'd create new subdivisions that we would not, for lack of not lower the standard, but rather change our kind of going to more of a zero-scaping. We don't need 20 million shrubs and trees in every boulevard, maybe just gravel's okay. So that was the idea moving forward. We can't change what we've done in the past, and those maintenance levels have to be maintained. But moving forward, maybe we need to change the level. And I think infrastructure, yourselves, and development service are all working together to change those level of service in conjunction with working with the development community. Am I correct?
That is correct, yeah. We've addressed, well, starting to work on some of those things, reducing shrub beds, thinking in that exact regard. So, and across the board with our planning team and other departments, that's the message, and we are actively trying to reduce those high-level services that we provide.
Yeah, like for example, I'm just thinking to myself, traffic circles, I don't think we need 20 spruce trees in there, even though they look beautiful. After a while, when they do get big, it actually acts as an inheritance. It's so tough to see you coming around those things. So we have to almost think 15 years ahead and all that. So I'm glad that you're looking at it. I know that Mr. Sanchez's team has been looking at that as well for the last year. So great to hear.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Mr. Richter. Where I was coming from with this was in regards to comments that I've previously made in regards to lower maintenance, scaping, and so forth. So you know where I'm headed on that, reduction in water use. I think one of the other pieces is the increase in staffing. We want to understand, I think, at a point in time during this budget cycle, whether the staff utilization is improving the level of service, maintaining the level of service. Are we getting good value for money out of the people that we've hired? And I think if we get an interim report sometime between now and 2026 as to the efficacy of those changes in the budget in regards to your department, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
So, Mr. Richter, did we give you enough homework back? Excellent. One new question, might be something Rec and Culture can help more with. Again, because of the use of the parks, new ideas come forward all the time that impact the parks. Have you heard of any new sports? What's the next pickleball? Like, is there anything that you've heard coming down the pike that is going to influence your parks department that we should know about in advance?
Yeah, that's probably a question best suited for Rec and Culture. I think pickleball is sort of still the main sort of up-and-comer that's just building more and more of a fan base. So I haven't heard anything unusual yet. So.
Yeah, I know there's always new sports being invented, and they all want space in the park immediately. So it's one of those things. I don't see anyone else in the queue, so we will move to the motion, which I have here, and I'll read just in a moment. Before we go, it'll be part of my debate anyways, but when you look at your 2023 plan, it is incredible how much Parks is doing, the different things that are part of the Parks Department. Most people just think of the grass mowing, but it is absolutely incredible how much is in there. So thank you very much for the information and for sitting here and letting us grill you again today. But we'll move to the motion, which is from Deputy Mayor Parker. Be it resolved that the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee recommends that Council receive for information the Parks and Cemeteries 2022 Annual Report. Deputy Mayor.
First of all, is there any questions? Obviously, the questions were asked already in regards to the report. I just want to thank Mr. Richter and his team. They've done an amazing job. I think when we had that open house at the NMAX, or not the NMAX, yeah, at the NMAX Center a month or so, or almost 2 months ago, it was a great opportunity to have the public, and I know that his area was probably the most visited in regards to the opportunity of responsible dog park new locations. When I say new locations, possibly 1 or 2, not 20 like some in the community thought. But your department does a great job, and it's you guys do a good job in engaging the community. I think no one in this community takes their parks for granted. I think we all value that. And we knew that firsthand about 2 years ago when we as a council cut the budget back a little bit, and the parks weren't maintenance to a level that people expected. So it was a tough year, but at the same time, it showed us firsthand how much people appreciate a certain type of level of service that your team delivers. And I know that you have 50, hundreds of people that work for you in the come peak of season when you got students coming back or seasonal workers and all that. So I just want to say thank you to yourself, but also to all the staff, as well as the people in the cemeteries. We do appreciate our cemeteries. We have, I do believe, 4 cemeteries in the city that the city helps maintain and all that. So the stuff that you folks do behind the scenes is greatly appreciated. And I thank you for your report. As Councillor Middleton Hope said earlier, it's very well laid out. It's easy to read, and then people in the community can look online to take a look at it any time as well. So I want to thank you very much.
All right, anyone else for debate? Okay,
Question?
call the question. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Richter. Great presentation. We move now to Ms. Gearing, General Manager, Planning and Design. Planning and Design 22 Annual Report. Your chance now to get grilled.
Or cheer.
So thank you, Madam Chair. It's always hard coming after somebody like Parks, but we will do our best. Good afternoon. I am excited to present our first annual report. Because it is the first report, we have included quite a bit of additional context and background information, just to give everyone an idea of the work that we do. And in subsequent years, we probably won't need to include all that information. I would also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the staff from Planning and Design who worked on this report, including Kurt Fisher, Genesis Hevia Oreo, Janet Gitzel, Bradley McLeod, and Ross Kilgar. I'd also like to thank the city staff who helped us out with the MDP indicators. So there was a lot of back and forth and work done by all the departments to ensure that we got you that information. And lastly but not least, all the staff in Planning and Design for the public service they deliver every day. I also have the functional managers from Planning and Design here and Mr. Kilgar to answer any questions that you may have later. And next slide, please. So just before you is an organizational chart. Since this presentation was prepared, the urban design and management has moved directly under Mr. Sanchez, and therefore there are now 39 employees within our department. Next slide, please. So this is a visual just to explain how the functional areas work together. The diagram is used in the report with the icons representing the functions or phases of developing our city. So we start with planning on the left, moving through to urban design, development, and building inspection on the right. Next slide, please. So we often get asked how we compare with other areas. This municipal benchmarking study was a good study for us. We weren't included in it, but yet we were able to follow the methodology of how they prepared the statistics as closely as we could. We followed that methodology and manually calculated in terms of all planning approvals, which includes development but doesn't include building permits. We do rank extremely high in terms of level of service and approval time in terms of months. So we don't often have the opportunity to showcase ourselves in regards to other municipalities. Oftentimes it is hard to find the data, and so we did appreciate the opportunity to rank ourselves in this case. And next slide, please. So for each functional area, we have selected just 1 or 2 slides to highlight the work of the area. And starting with urban design, this slide shows developed hectares and new lots, as well as the offsite levies collected. So the stats from urban design are actually a really good predictor for the activity in the other 3 areas that will happen in the same year or subsequent years. And Mr. Bazunas is here to answer any questions in regards to his area. And next slide, please. So in terms of planning highlights, this area is a team led by Jason Price. We have included stats for you just in terms of land use bylaw applications, highlighting the rezoning aspect, so showing the difference between direct control and conventional zonings. While rezonings to direct control are fairly consistent in the last few years in terms of numbers, As a percentage of the total, they are rising. And so this is an indicator to staff that through our land use bylaw rewrite process, we will have the opportunity to look at how land uses are grouped together in various districts, and if there are some efficiencies we can see, and therefore lessen the need for applicants to have to go through that process. As well, we've also included subdivisions for the last 5 years. Subdivision stats are linked very closely to the work of Mr. Bazunas and his team. In terms of COVID, we were actually having new lots being approved. Oftentimes there is a time lag for developers, so they develop in phases. And so we did see quite a few lots developed last year. This year, perhaps we may not see as many. So just as a little bit of a forewarning for you. And next slide, please. So the development highlights, this is a team led by Angie Olson. As well, we often get questioned how responsive we are in terms of meeting our timelines. So the Municipal Government Act mandates that once an application is deemed complete with all the necessary information, a decision must be issued within 40 days. So the development team is really successful in meeting this requirement, as you can see by the graph. We had 764 development permits issued last year, and only 38 of them didn't meet the timeline. There's a variety of reasons for that. Usually there is some back and forth with circulation. Sometimes people think that the earlier they get the application in, the better, but actually having a complete application at the beginning is the most effective. So sometimes it does pay to go slower when you start out, and that ends to a faster approval in the end. And next slide, please. So building inspection highlights, this is a team led by Ryan Slovak. We have 2 slides on building inspections, and our department data is the most robust for this area, as you can see in the report. In the last few years, we haven't seen as many high-value projects. Usually these are institutional or industrial projects, but we did see, through COVID, many sub-trades and renovation permits that kept the staff busy. So there was quite a change within 2020 and 2021. Next slide, please. And as well, this slide illustrates the success of the eApply online application system. So the business support team has worked tirelessly to develop the forms and workflow, as well as providing training and troubleshooting to both staff and to customers. Planning and design was able to eliminate 2 front-facing FTEs with all the work moving online. And we do hear numerous compliments and comments on how convenient it is for industry to be able to apply for their permits 24/7. So we're essentially never closed. The department was able to carry on throughout COVID due to the eApply system, and that made us very responsive in getting back to our customers. We continue to add new modules to the eApply system as resources allow us to. And next slide, please. So municipal development plan implementation tracking. This was an initiative led by Ross Kilgar. Rather than submit a separate report in regards to the municipal development plan, the idea was that we would report out annually in the planning and design report. We'll continue to do this in the future, and we think it actually is good because it kind of ties all the work of the department together. Work is underway in many areas, as you can see. We have had a very long and extensive spreadsheet that we didn't put into the report, but we are tracking this. And at the 5-year milestone after the adoption of the MDP, we will be able to provide a little bit more fulsome reporting out and accounting, as it does take several years in some instances for actually projects to go through and initiatives to get completed. And so myself and the team are here to answer any questions for you today.
Very much, Ms. Gehring. Again, I don't see any members of the public who have questions, but I do have questions from the committee, starting with Deputy Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Gehring, and to your team for a good presentation. Just the municipal comparisons, that 3rd slide, I don't understand exactly what I'm looking at. It says municipal comparisons. Are these for when someone pulls a development permit, or what does this municipal comparisons mean?
These are all planning approvals. So it's a development permit, a subdivision application, a rezoning, an amendment to a statutory or official plan.
So these are all added together, and this is kind of the average here?
That's correct. So in the municipal benchmarking study, they do have a methodology as part of that document. And so that outlines the sorts of things they look at when they put all of the timelines together.
So this could be anything from, like, if Mr. Smith comes in and goes, I want to build a house, and he pulls the permit to the end, everything from if a developer comes in and wants to create a whole new subdivision, all those are added together, and this is how it divides out kind of on the average?
So not exactly. It doesn't include building permits. And there is some of that urban design type work that wouldn't be included in this comparison. So part of the challenge for us is that different provinces call things differently, right? And as well, not being involved in the study meant we just had to sort of interpret the methodology and what they use to the best of our ability, and then look for comparators in terms of what our work is so that we could measure up.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, thank you for that. So the department integration diagram, that ties in with the municipal comparisons then, or are they completely separate?
The integration diagram shows how we do our work.
Okay, so
It's separate from the municipal comparison.
So since this is online, right, so people will be able to look at this. So when I was looking at the municipal comparisons, I think if we could add one thing here, what this means, so someone understands, like, otherwise I wouldn't know when I see 4 point on municipal comparisons what that means. So I think almost like just a definition of what this means, because this is a good number, but if you have to understand what the number means, so that would be great. Everything else looks really, really good. One more question I had here in regards to permits, Ms. Olson's department. So is this development highlights, this percentage of application? This is Mrs. Olson's department, right? So is this when someone comes in and says, I want to put let's say a basement suite in or something like that? This is the timelines from start to finish, and this is like, would this be the amount, the numbers?
That's correct, and that's when we get a completed application, Councillor Parker, yes.
Perfect, that's awesome. This is a very nice report, thank you.
Councillor Palladino, you're next in the line.
Thank you. He asked just about the same questions I was gonna ask you. The approval time, we talked about that. In the full report, the average residential permit takes about 5 days, and I'm assuming that's for a single-family home then. And then it goes on to say, with the approval time removed, residential permits can be issued in a day or less. That's impressive. But if the approval time is removed, what does that mean?
So we don't require development permits for single detached dwellings per se. It's actually when the building permit comes in, the residential development officer has a look to ensure that it meets all the specifics. It is a different process for a duplex and for secondary suites and those sorts of things. But for single detached dwellings, we do them extremely quickly.
That's good. I asked this of Parks and Cemeteries, and I hope you can drill down a bit further. Did you mention 39 employees?
Yes.
In your department? And so how many are DOs, how many are planners, how many are inspectors?
Oh, goodness,
Roughly.
okay. So, development officers, I have 7.
We have 7, I guess, with me.
7 with Angie. That includes a compliance officer, and it also includes 2 permit techs. And Jason?
6 planners, GIS tech and Anderson tech.
So there's 8 in Jason's area. And Ryan?
15 safety codes officers. I have 2 business support staff that handle the technical systems and support for both internal and customers.
And 2 permit techs.
For the benefit of Councillor Middleton Hope, I don't know if he got any of that because they're not mic'd. So 7 development officers, 8
Planning area.
planning staff, and 15 safety codes.
As well as 2 business support. So business support are our technical experts in terms of IT that help us with the Tempest system and our e-apply, as well as get all the great stats that we have here in the report, and as well 2 permit techs.
Final question, and I know it's not 2022, or sorry, this report is for 2022, not 2023, but looking ahead, what is your next plan of action for the new land use bylaw? Are you, I don't think you're going outside of the organization, or are you? Are you going to go to a consultant?
So currently, we are working on the charter and the scope of work for the land use bylaw project. There will be some consulting that we will be doing. We haven't nailed down exactly which direction we will go. We are following, kind of closely looking at what Edmonton has done with their land use bylaw project, and they have hired a zoning advisor. So what that looks like in terms of if it's extra legal support, if it's extra planning support, we'll have to see. As well, we probably will be looking at an engagement consultant. So there will be hiring some outside consulting.
And council will be kept in a loop, I guess, it's in some form or another.
So part of that project involves doing a communication and engagement plan, which will be presented to council. And so that'll have some milestones where you see where you will be kept in the loop on the process, and as well as any engagements and what topics we may be talking about.
Great, thanks, Maureen.
Councillor Middleton Hope, you're next in the queue.
Thank you. 3 quick questions. The first one is, do the neighborhood redevelopment plans work with either associations or developers on infills in addition to secondary suites and commercial properties?
So we do have a couple of area redevelopment plans. We work very closely with the neighborhood associations. Some neighborhood associations have visions for their neighborhood that may not include as much density as perhaps from a planning professional's point of view we would like to see, but we realize it's a work in progress. We definitely, on the area redevelopment plans for London Road and for Westminster, we did engage commercial as well, people that are within the neighborhood to understand how that dynamic works. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but.
Yeah, just the term infills, is it a term that we use here? Other cities do use it, and I'm just curious, do we use that term?
We do use that term. Usually we use infill when we're adding a dwelling unit. So whether that's a secondary suite or whether it is subdividing a large lot to add an additional residence in, it's not a replacement. So when you're replacing a house with a house, we don't consider that infill.
Yeah, no, that's my understanding as well. Thank you. In the report, average issuance time of permits for structural builds, which include everything from decks to 50-story buildings, is compared to Calgary. Wouldn't a comparison to a mid-sized city, and we have 26 across the province, wouldn't that be provide us with a closer comparison?
It definitely would, Councillor Middleton Hope, if all the data was available online for us to look at, or if we were able to source that data. So that is something that going forward would be wonderful to have, but we just weren't able to find that data.
Okay, so you now have, I think you said you have 2 analysts who are part of your team. That might be something to look forward to.
Yes, they do, I wouldn't say on an annual basis, but they do keep their pulse on what other municipalities are putting online in terms of data, in terms of dashboards and that sort of a thing. And yeah, we continue to look for that information, but sometimes it just isn't there for us.
Okay. Last question. It would appear that permits and plans are now being applied for predominantly online. Are we finding there are fewer or more errors in the application process, which may contribute to delays in issuance?
So I'll start with this, and perhaps Mr. Slovak might want to finish, but I would suggest that we have pretty robust checklists in terms of the permits that come in online. Even when people come to the front counter, they sit with a permit tech and they actually establish an account and then go through the permit process that way. Sometimes people can misinterpret what they might need to include, but I know the team does work pretty hard in terms of making it foolproof so that everything there on the checklist is available for the applicant or applier to understand what they need to provide and what they need to fill out properly. I'm not sure, Ryan, if you want to add anything there.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. The only thing I would add from Maureen is that the system actually, we've had the opportunity to go back and take a lot of the gray area out. And if I take you back to December the 13th when we brought the fees and charges bylaw to you before, a lot of the work that we're doing is to simplify the fee structures to be able to take these things online. And the system actually is really efficient at stepping a customer through and providing them the background information. There's all kinds of help buttons and things to give people a lot of coaching on the process. And so what we have done is introduced a lot more consistency in the applications. It actually has reduced rekeying errors, everything was paper-based before, and so people were handwriting things down, and then our staff were rekeying that information into the system. And we've eliminated kind of that whole middle process where the customer just inputs their information directly in. And so we've eliminated all kinds of keying errors and interpretation on what fees should be. And we've simplified it so that the consistency is there and the applications are more complete, and it allows for a quicker processing time and permit issuance in the end.
Good. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Geary.
So when we're looking at the MDP, very new time for the MDP, from this perspective early on, are there anything in there that you don't think we can achieve?
So I think in this particular MDP, it was based upon a lot of the public engagement that departments were already engaging in and work and master plans that were already in place. So there's always things that can happen that are unexpected that may put a bump in the road or may change direction. But I think it is not as aspirational as the last one, and therefore it's a lot more specific. So I think some things will take years to achieve. Some of it will involve the values of the community, if the community is there to support in making some of the outcomes attainable. I don't personally believe that there's anything in there that we can't achieve, but it is a matter of time. And of course, it is based on the community and what the community feels as well.
You're one of the departments that has moved a lot of stuff online. We have some other departments that have not. Have you been working with any other departments to give them some best practices? Like, is that something that is discussed at administrative level, going, you know, we've done this, this is how it could be done? Because it seems that some other areas are struggling to move as much online as your department has.
So I know the business support team and Mr. Slovak work very closely with IT. I know some of the enhancements that we've done through online permitting have been exported to fire prevention, to electrical. We actually had parks come and want to do some permitting and some processing online as well. And it is a matter of resourcing for us too. So we have our own department modules that we want to do, and then as well we do work for other departments. So I think there is good conversations happening, but in the end it does come down to resourcing in terms of both personnel and time. So.
Sorry, just behind you there's a lot of nodding in agreement with you. So.
Well, that's good. I'm glad.
Yeah, it's when they look query. We're looking at a new website, like, you know, development. Will that affect anything that you've already done, or will your modules easily transfer over? Has that been considered about how that might affect you?
We're working through that process. We do have some opportunity in March to have a look at how that's going to work. I know that our business support people and as well some of our web editors and planning have been very involved with comms and the consultants. So we are hoping for a very smooth transition because, yes, we do a lot of work online. So.
And following up from what Councillor Middleton Hope said with regards to area redevelopment plans, which ones are you working on right now, and do you have sort of a timeline? I suspect they're going to go faster than Westminster.
So actually, Ms. Hevia Oreo is leading an effort in Victoria Park, and I believe that that plan is due to be finished this year. Mr. Price, if you could confirm that. Yeah, and actually the way, I think there's a lot of learnings every time you go through a planning process. And so in this particular case, they have a really robust advisory group from the community. And there's been some really good discussions that have happened. And yeah, it'll be an interesting plan when it comes before council.
Okay, perfect. I had one more question. That was, where did I write that one down? Oh, do you see any new provincial and or federal changes coming down the pike that we should be aware of that will affect your department?
We don't at this particular time. I think Mr. Slovak and I have talked quite a bit about like national building code and provincial building code. Not sure, Ryan, if there's anything in the next year. I don't believe so, but we do pay attention to that, and Ryan's staff do sit on Safety Codes Council as well. So that's a really good opportunity to know what is up and coming and what sorts of things we may need to respond to.
Oh, Mr. Sanchez, you're in the queue for rebuttal, or not rebuttal, for a comment.
Yes, no, I just want to comment a little bit. on the questions from Councilor Middleton Hope regarding comparisons and the work that planning and design has done here. One of the things we have on the go is that we're working to see if there is a possibility to have what we call a tri-summit. It's Red Deer, Mad Hat, and Lethbridge, and trying to get meetings between these three cities and then bring along planning and design, transportation, electric, other areas within the infrastructure group in order to share best practices. And even when you see the annual reports, I believe the first annual report we did was last year when we had waste and recycling. And it's something that I truly believe is a good thing to do for the departments to showcase the good work they do. And at the same time, to bring that a tool to 3112, because most of the questions that we get can be answered in these reports. And if we continue having these trends year after year, we can see how are we doing. Are we getting better? Are we not getting better? What do we need to do the continuous improvement? And hopefully at one point, one of the projects that we have on the go right now is creating that benchmark. If SPC remembers, like in 2014, we were part of a benchmark program within the province, and that stopped at that time because of funding, but it's something that I truly believe is a good opportunity for us to see how are we comparing, how are we doing the work. And one of the issues that we have when we go to the other benchmarks that are there is that are we comparing apples to apples? And that's where it's really complicated. If we can manage to get similar municipalities within the province so we can create a framework that will allow us to move forward and to bring better information to council and to the residents.
I don't know what my colleagues feel, but I like having these annual reports, and I'm so glad that you're bringing them. It allows us to have a conversation when, before a public concern comes up, like just to have an ongoing conversation and to educate both us and the public on what is happening. So personally, I'm very happy with them. My last two questions sort of are combined, Ms. Gehring. Just a broad one. Are there any concerns in your department that is worrying you, and are there any opportunities in your department that is making you really happy?
Oh, wow. Okay. I think staff are always, as we get into big projects like the land use bylaw rewrite, looking at what's happening across the country and in other jurisdictions and how things may play out here in Lethbridge and how issues may or may not translate appropriately. I don't want to pick on any particular issue, but there's definitely things happening out there that we want to make sure we are communicating clearly to the community what the project is about and what it isn't about. And so I think that's one of the areas that with an engagement consultant we want to really focus on, is making sure that our messaging to the public is correct. Yeah.
Want me to say 15-minute cities? Sorry, just
Well, as
kidding.
long as you say it, I guess that's better than me saying it, but. One of the things that we are looking at this year is there are some staff retiring. And so it's always an opportunity to look at succession planning, to look at positioning in terms of new hires and that sort of a thing. So yeah, I think that'll be interesting as a department. We have a really broad demographic, so we have younger people, and as well we have older people too. So yeah, it's always interesting seeing how everybody comes together and the different issues that the different demographics bring. So.
Perfect, thank you. I don't see anyone else in the queue, so we will move to the motion. So thank you very much, Ms. Gehring. And this is from Councillor Palladino. Be it resolved that the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee recommends that Council receive for information the Planning and Design 2022 Annual Report. Councillor Palladino.
Thank you. We've been presented with the first ever annual report from Planning and Design for 2022. It is a valuable overview of the department's scope of work and performance. Good information. A summary includes the first MDP annual report as well, and both documents will be returning to council each year for updates. So if there are no further comments or questions, I would call a question.
I don't think anybody has any debate, so question is called. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Hopefully we didn't grill you guys too hard, and we are adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We can always talk off the books.
You're 50.